your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us. 4 members of a high school football team in Lethbridge have been charged with the sexual assault of a fellow player. Lethbridge police say on October 3rd, a 16-year-old male was forcibly confined and sexually assaulted after school hours in a locker room at Chinook High School. The victim and those allegedly who assaulted him were all members of the same football team. Staff Sergeant Pete Christos says it was the victim who came forward to police and reported the incident. He encourages anyone who has been a victim of sexual assault to speak out.
The victim, who was very courageous, came forward and reported to the police, and we took the investigation on from there. It really depends on the victim themselves. When it's appropriate and when they feel that they are able to speak about the incident, we encourage them to come forward and report it to the police.
Police say they also seized a weapon that was used during the alleged assault. All 4 males, 2 aged 17 and 2 aged 16, are charged with sexual assault with a weapon and unlawful confinement. The teens will appear in youth court on October 25th. As temperatures dip, you may notice some unexpected and unwanted house guests. Beetle-like bugs with reddish backs are being spotted taking up residence in people's homes. BCN's Naveen Day explains why and also how to give them their eviction notice.
Box elder bugs, more commonly known as maple bugs, breed and nest in maple and box elder trees. But the insects don't survive the winters outside on the cold surface, which is why they can often be found trying to get into your warm home. While many find the presence of insects to be off-putting, entomologist with the University of Lethbridge, Dan Johnson, says they're not dangerous.
They don't attack gardens, they don't attack yards, trees, other than the maple. They hardly even hurt the maple.
So why are there so many of these bugs visible this year? Johnson says it has a lot to do with the weather. A series of warm, dry summers is helping their numbers grow over the years, and he adds the insects have little to no predators.
Many things don't eat them because they taste really bad. They're like ladybug. Ladybugs have a bad taste. And these are not in the same group as ladybugs, which are actually beetles. These are true bugs, and they have kind of a stinky, bad-tasting blood.
Squishing or swatting maple bugs can cause a very smelly odor and stain to be released that will just attract more of the bugs. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
A Canadian man has completed an incredible journey across our country to raise funds and awareness for schizophrenia. Matthew Dixon has made it to the Atlantic Ocean and has become the first man with the mental illness to cycle through Canada. The Schizophrenia Society of Alberta says around 44,000 Albertans are currently living with schizophrenia. Video journalist Micah Quinn caught up with Dixon to talk about his cross-country journey.
I'm the king of the world! Matthew Dixon says one of the first things he did following his bike ride across Canada was to contact the Canadian Museum of History to see if they would be interested in putting his bike on display.
I'm curious to see what they'll say. They may not be interested in it, but they do take modern things. They've got video games in there and whatnot, so I'm curious to see what they'd think about that. Some people have told me, well, wouldn't you want to keep your bike? I'm like, well, I don't know. It would be nice to have it in the museum for others to see.
According to the Government of Alberta, schizophrenia is a severe mental illness that can affect your ability to think clearly, manage your emotions, and interact with others. The Schizophrenia Society of Alberta provides help for people who are dealing with the illness, including right here in Lethbridge.
Here at the Schizophrenia Society, we do community education programs in the community to raise that awareness. And at those presentations, to people living with schizophrenia, tell their personal stories of living with the illness. And it's very moving, it's very impactful. And it goes a long way to reducing that stigma when people actually are able to meet someone that's living with schizophrenia and doing well.
It's a good shoulder here.
Dixon told us that he has a couple of upcoming projects in the works to showcase his cross-Canada trip to the public.
I'm working on a book. I've mostly written the book for my daily Facebook posts along the ride with photos that I took. And I'm in the process of getting that underway. And also a friend is helping me make a film about the bike ride. And he says he can't guarantee the quality of it. He says, I may not like it, but he says, hopefully we will enjoy it and want to enter it in film festivals.
Bye, Matthew.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Up next, shockwaves of last weekend's attack in Israel are being felt close to home. We'll be right back. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly arrived in Tel Aviv just prior to the weekend for talks on last weekend's attack by Hamas and the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. Joly is to meet with Israel's Foreign Affairs Minister and her counterpart from Jordan to reaffirm Canada's support for Israel and its right to defend itself in accordance with international law, while pushing for the swift passage of humanitarian aid and the protection of both Israeli and Palestinian civilians. Meanwhile, Canada has plans to continue airlifting Canadians out of the area. And the shockwaves of last weekend's attacks on Israel are being felt close to home. Here in Alberta, a senior rabbi with Chabad Lubavitch has only one word to describe how the community is handling the tragedy right now.
Terrible. Everyone has family members, everyone has friends, never mind in Israel, throughout the world, Israelis, Canadians, people from all over. I have nephews and nieces, I have cousins, I don't have children there. One of our rabbis here in Calgary has parents and siblings, people in our community who are now went for a vacation to our Holy Land and are stuck there and are suffering with it.
Rabbi Matusov adds that he believes many Muslim children have been brainwashed by Hamas and their extremist ideology. And in other news, Alberta's opposition New Democrats are calling for the government to hold in-person consultations on its plan to quit the Canada Pension Plan. The NDP says the United Conservatives are going to meddle with people's retirement savings. They should do so face-to-face. The UCP government is set to begin telephone town hall consultations next week on its plan to opt out of the federal plan. A panel led by former provincial finance minister Jim Dinning says there will be 5 90-minute town hall discussions over 6 weeks, with each session focused on getting feedback from a different region. And a bear warning has been issued for the town of Banff. Parks Canada officials say you should be prepared to encounter a bear at any time in the park. They say multiple black and grizzly bears have been frequenting the town site. Officials ask people to secure all wildlife attractants and to be sure to dispose of food and garbage in bear-proof bins. A Lethbridge couple in their 60s and their dog were killed last week when attacked by a grizzly in the backcountry near Banff. The 25-year-old bear was put down. And in an effort to prevent the spread of COVID-19, Alberta Health Services has implemented a new masking directive for acute care facilities. The new rules require staff, doctors, midwives, and others to mask up when in hospitals. If the measures are implemented by AHS leadership, masks would also be required for patients, designated support persons, and those who visit emergency departments in healthcare facilities. A news release from AHS does say, however, that no patient shall be denied services. If the extended masking rules are implemented, they would require people to mask up in patient care areas, elevators, hallways, common areas, along with gift shops and cafeterias. Officials say signs will be put up at each facility. The Alberta government and Ottawa are teaming up to create up to 22,500 affordable private childcare spaces in the province. $28 million will be allocated to support private operators, with some of the costs associated with opening new childcare spaces. Government officials say the expansion through the Early Learning and Childcare Agreement will support licensed childcare spaces in high-need and high-demand communities across the province.
Parents who are challenged to find accessible and affordable childcare right now will be happy to know that funding will focus on creating new spaces in communities where they are needed the most. And the grant will help us meet our overall commitment to create over 68,700 new affordable licensed spaces by 2026.
The Alberta NDP is calling on the province for urgent funding to support the conversion of empty office spaces in downtown Calgary into affordable housing. Party leader Rachel Notley says the latest market report from Commercial Real Estate pegs Calgary's downtown office vacancy rate at 30.9%, which is the highest in the country.
The city of Calgary now already has a program in place to convert a lot of these spaces into affordable housing. In fact, it's been very successful to date. It's seen a lot of interest from developers who are able to build units quickly, often cutting design and construction timelines in half compared to new purpose-built rental projects. The program has been so successful that it's been oversubscribed and will run out of city funding very soon.
It's been exactly a year since Alberta elected its new premier. After the break, we dive into Danielle Smith's year of fights with the feds and changing agenda. That's next. Welcome back. It's been a year since Alberta elected its new premier, and since that time, Danielle Smith has picked a few new fights with the federal government and in some ways has moderated her agenda, including seemingly dropping her promise to legislate protection for the unvaccinated, as well as putting the Alberta Police Force on the back burner. Here's BCN's Hal Roberts and legislative correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, discussing the one-year anniversary of Premier Smith.
Tyler Smith dropped her promise to enshrine protections for the unvaccinated in human rights legislation, and she also moderated her stance on the idea of a provincial police force. Why do you think she backed away from that?
Well, I think part of what the calculation that she's doing right now is she has a couple constituencies to please. The first, obviously, is the membership of the United Conservative Party, and more specifically, in some ways, the people to whom she owes her leadership. Jason Kenney was only barely forced out. If we cast our mind back to, what was that, May 2022 when he left, he actually won that leadership review, but it was by 0.5% or something like that. So there's, a schism within the United Conservative Party. It's still the old Wild Rose PC sort of, amalgamation that it's always been. So she has to keep those sort of two sides in the UCP happy. And prior to the election earlier this year, she also needed to make sure she wasn't scaring away sort of soft center-right voters who may have looked to Rachel Notley's New Democrats if they got a little bit frightened by some of the stuff she'd proposed. So in the case of the enshrining rights for the unvaccinated, I think that's probably part of the calculation there. Probably part of the calculation was whether or not they could even write legislation that would work nicely, whether it would hold up in court, some of those things. And the provincial police is a similar situation. This was not an idea that was particularly popular, and notably, it was really unpopular in some of the places where I think the UCP thought it would be popular, and that was sort of small town in rural Alberta, where they've been dealing with rural crime and theft and property damage and things like that for the last few years. And the idea of a provincial police force was to have a more local, a more engaged police force that was more responsive to the concerns of the folks who lived there. And it wasn't a very popular idea for them. So that idea is still sort of on the table. It didn't show up in the mandate letters for her public safety minister or the justice minister. So it's pretty safe to say, I think, that it's on the back burner. And one other thing that I would mention in the context of this is on Wednesday, the government brought back mask mandates in Alberta Health Services facilities, in hospitals, for staff, for visitors, for patients, things like that. But it's a far cry from what we saw a couple of years ago. It leaves a lot of outs, for example, for local hospitals or regional health authorities that don't really want to go down this road. So you can see, I think, some of her moderation there. She is looking at the rising case counts and things like that and saying, possibly we need to do something to protect hospital workers, so let's bring in a mask mandate. But this is bound to be politically unpopular in some parts of the province, so we'll give them some more local autonomy over it.
Now, Tyler, Premier Smith does appear to be on board with trying to launch an Alberta pension plan. Is a referendum on the subject forthcoming anytime soon?
Jim Dinning, the former PC finance minister, is doing a sort of consultation. He's got a panel together looking at the idea. And I think he's supposed to report back next fall is, I think, the date that's in my mind. So it's not coming anytime soon, it is interesting, though, because I'm sure we've all seen the ads on social media for it. I believe there's also billboard ads and things like that are out there. So the government is certainly talking like this is something they're going to do. But, again, this is not a super popular policy proposal. The most recent polling from Abacus data shows that I think about 52% of Albertans think it's a bad idea. That's actually more people than if you ask that question of other Canadians. If you ask other Canadians, should Alberta leave the Canada Pension Plan, about 47% think it's a bad idea, but 52% of Albertans say it's a bad idea. And moreover, it's really unpopular with people over the age of 60 who are probably drawing on their CPP or getting close to it. And the UCP's voter base tends to skew a little bit older, I would say, than the New Democrats. So really, really interesting scenario in which they've got, I don't think they would say this is a slam dunk. I don't think anyone would say it is, but it's certainly going to be an uphill battle for the UCP to sort of convince Albertans that this is a good idea, because at no point since the idea has come up has the polling been sort of overwhelmingly in favor of going down this road.
Next, we hear from an Alberta minister who's deeply concerned for his friends in Israel, and that includes Jews, Christians, and Palestinians. We'll be right back.
Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the country, and as Defense Minister, and they've talked about just literally flattening Gaza. We pray that doesn't happen.
Welcome back. An Alberta pastor who has visited Israel many times says he's concerned for his friends who live in that part of the world. That includes some who are Palestinians living in the Holy Land. He says he hopes Israel will rethink its plan to attack Gaza because of the number of innocent lives that will surely be lost. Greg Musselman is the Minister at Large for Voice of the Martyrs Canada and host of the podcast Closer to the Fire. Welcome to Bridge City News, Greg. Great to have you back on again.
Oh, it's so good to be here. And as you mentioned, the whole situation in Israel, in Gaza has us all troubled. And there's so many things going around. But I think as we even start this is to remember that, God is working, and we remember that. But, many innocent lives are being lost. And that's a sad reality.
When we look at what's happening right now in Israel, specifically in Gaza, which started over this Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. We saw this surprise attack of Hamas on the Jews, and we're hearing of these horrible atrocities on civilians in their own homes. People at a music festival being ambushed. So, Greg, what's your take on all of this? Do you think that this will become a full-out war? What do you think?
Well, Israel has declared it as a full-out war. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the country, and as Defense Minister, and they've talked about just literally flattening Gaza. We pray that doesn't happen, because these are innocent people that are being killed, by the attacks that are taking place right now in Gaza. And of course, we know the hundreds, 800-900 Jewish people were killed, and some that were visiting the country, even to this music festival where they opened fire on these innocent people. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. And I actually got an email from a friend of mine. I've actually spoken at his church in Bethlehem, which is a part of the West Bank. So that's different than Gaza, people familiar with that part of the world. And the concern there is that, they're Palestinian Christians. So they're seen as somewhat as traitors because they've left Islam, or, they've been, for centuries and generations, they've been Christians. And so they're concerned that the attacks could come on them from the Muslims. And then, so it's just a really difficult situation. So we need to be praying for our Jewish friends, what's going on there. We pray for the leadership of Israel, that they will do the right thing. And I know it's a terrible situation with terrorism and all that's gone on, but there are innocent people that are losing their lives. And one of the interesting things, Jeanette, is that when I talk about, Christians in Israel and the Holy Land, many of them are Palestinians from, or Arab backgrounds. And so there are brothers and sisters in Christ, and we need to be praying for them. And also for the peace of Jerusalem, we are commanded in Scripture as well. This is a very dangerous situation, and it could involve other countries. We hear Iran, is backing Hamas, and then Hezbollah up in the north as well. So there's another area there that Israel is being attacked. So it's a very dangerous situation, and we need to continue to pray. I just can't emphasize that enough, and to help in whatever ways we can.
You just recently returned from a trip to Africa. So maybe, it wasn't your first time. You've been there many times. And each time you return, you do have these stories of violence. So why are the governments there in those certain countries, Nigeria and whatnot, why don't they seem to be able to get a handle on that continuing violence over there?
Most of northern Nigeria is Muslim. Most of southern Nigeria is Christian. Now, there are Muslims living in the south. There's Christians living in the north. And so, and I've been there, as you mentioned, a number of times, been in the north. And so you have maybe a community that is Christian. So the majority could be Muslim in that, whatever state it is, Borno State, Kano State, Kaduna, or wherever it might be. So there would be mostly Muslim, but there would be Christian communities. And so those communities are often attacked because they are, as I say, the majority, if not all of them, are Christian because of some of the tension that goes on. And so these militant Islamists come in, and even heard stories of the government, troops, police, military are aware that there's some talk about an attack, and they don't do anything about it. The question is, why don't they do anything about it? Is it incompetence? They don't care. But the reality is, a lot of times these Christians are left unprotected, and that's why the casualty numbers can be so intense, and burning of churches and Christian homes. And I have interviewed dozens of, I would say dozens now, of Nigerian widows whose husbands have been killed on this recent trip just a few weeks ago when I was in Nigeria teaching pastors in Kaduna State, and met some ladies whose husbands had both been killed. One just actually in the last year, one lady from a couple of years ago, her husband was a pastor. And so we're, helping them with these skills programs so that they can be self-supporting. But again, the government just doesn't seem to have the ability or the will to do anything to stop these attacks.
We need to take a quick break, but when we return, we discuss the consequences of big tech banning news on Canadian social media. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The recent censorship of Canadian news by tech giants has been the consequence of the passage of Bill C-18 this past June. And it seems the federal government still hasn't taken responsibility for the impact the bill has had on news agencies and those who consume online news. But there is an organization dedicated to upholding the online rights and freedoms of Canadians, and they tell us there's something we can do about it. Here's part of my interview with Matt Hatfield of Open Media. Welcome, Matt. Thanks so much for joining us today to shed some light on this very significant issue.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Matt, maybe start off by sharing with us what Bill C-18 is, if we don't already know, and why was it tabled to begin with?
So Bill C-18 is kind of a complicated scheme that is supposed to take money from tech giants and reward it to news outlets. There are versions of a proposal like that where the government would have just made a fund and distributed money from the fund. The government decided not to do that, and their idea was essentially to force both parties to the negotiating table. So they would set a bunch of terms of like, your deals have to look like this, that, and the other, and we are going to require you to reach deals with any number of news companies. And the platforms had the choice of saying, well, we're just not going to carry any news, and Facebook decided they're not, and Google may follow suit.
Right, which is really unfortunate. So we have the federal government here telling Facebook and, well, I guess it was Meta and Google and, Twitter, I guess, that this is how the terms are going to be. So, I mean, I guess what happened was what most of us sort of expected was going to happen. I don't know why the federal government didn't have that foresight, but here we are. And so unfortunately, you're saying Google might follow suit now, meaning that we're not going to get news on Google?
Yeah, so, there's some detail to how each of them do it. So the way Meta's done it, they've chosen to block all news in Canada. So you actually can't even get news from outside of Canada, which those news outlets outside of Canada wouldn't have been compensated in any case. Meta doesn't really see themselves as being in the business of sharing news. It is a bit different with Google. It's more important to Google. But Google seems to be signaling that they're still not happy with the bill and are still going to just stop providing links to news on their search engine instead of complying with it.
Okay, interesting. And what do you think if the bill were somehow rescinded? What do you think would happen? Do you think that we could go back to getting news on social? Do you think too much damage has been done at this point?
I think there's still room for government to make a deal with Google, even keeping the bill. Certainly, if they pulled it, I think Google would stay, keep news. I don't think Facebook's going to come back in any environment. I think Meta fundamentally doesn't believe news is a big part of what their platform should be, and the government simply misunderstood that.
So, Matt, I want to talk about your organization now, Open Media. How is Open Media addressing these challenges posed by this legislation?
Yeah, so we've been pointing out to the government this wouldn't work from the start. I think there's a debate to have about how we support journalism in Canada. Some people think the government needs to play more of a role, provide funding. Many people, of course, are very worried about the government, picking winners and losers in journalism. Unfortunately, C18 kind of combines the worst of every approach. The government was playing a pretty big role in how this funding would be distributed and who might benefit, but they weren't sort of taking responsibility for the consequences. And it's been disappointing to see the government still isn't really taking responsibility for the fact that not only have they not produced any new news funding at all, there's not a single new dollar so far, but they're actually hurting a lot of news outlets, which surely wasn't the point. So we are calling them on to go back to the drawing board and come back with something that actually helps the news, because this just isn't doing it.
Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, what's the best way to fight against media censorship in Canada, considering the evolving digital landscape and the challenges that it presents?
Yeah, so we encourage everyone to have a direct relationship with your news sources that you value. People should be coming direct to your website, subscribed to your newsletters, really making sure that these platforms aren't cutting them out, aren't the intermediary. And that's just healthier for all of us. And really, you got to raise your voice and be heard by government. So many more people are talking about the problems of this kind of approach to news now than were a year ago, before Meta started blocking things. And so we have petitions that you can take on openmedia.ca or .org, where you can really tell government, this isn't working. It's time for you to admit it and come back with something better. Let this bill go and support news in a different way.
Up next, the Alberta government says it has its own plan to meet the net zero emissions target, despite what the feds say. We dive into what the plan may look like after the break.
We saw 75% of Canada's investments in renewables. They were in Alberta last year. And this speaks to that free market, entrepreneurial spirit that Alberta is known for.